Morning, everyone. This is Psychic Medium Josh Simons coming to you with a Monday message for Monday, March 1st, 2021. So again, thank you for joining me with these. I'm going to dive right into the message for this week. Oftentimes I talk about spirits. I talk about the spirits of our ancestors, the spirits of our beloved dead, and what I would consider helping spirits, right? And we do. We have all of these around us: ancestors, beloved dead, helping spirits of all sorts. I want to talk about something called animism. And I don't know, some of you probably have heard of this term, animism, and it might be new to a lot of you as well. So animism is the idea that everything in our world has a spirit, from the stones, from the trees, from the rivers, to the lakes, to the mountains, to everything has a spirit, because everything is made of spirit. And I truly believe this. And the biggest tenets of my spiritual practice are honoring the ancestors that I have that worked hard to bring me here, and honoring nature. Nature to me is spirit. I don't see any difference between nature and spirit. I believe that our creator is creation, and that all of creation around us is part of the creator. I had a long winter, right? And this is March, so we've got about a month left of winter where we're at. And this winter has been long because I don't really like the cold, and it's hard for me to get out into nature, right? And I should probably dress for it and be better in it, but I just don't like the cold. I very much respond to that drive to hibernate, and I think a lot of us do, right? When it gets darker and it's colder, we want to spend more time inside, eating richer foods, all of that stuff, and that's a very human thing. And as the days are getting lighter and the temperatures are warming up, I find myself out in nature more, and boy, am I all the better for it. I'm a big believer in something called forest bathing, where you take a walk in the woods, take a walk in a park, take a walk anywhere where there's forest. And when you're done with that walk, you're going to feel so much better. And I really believe what that's about is your intermingling, if you will, with the spirits of all the trees, the spirits of the forest, the spirits of the land. So I talk often about ancestors and the spirits of humans. This week's message is all about the spirits that surround us that are not human. This is really important for all of us because we suffer from the programs of religion. And I'm not talking about just Western religions, I'm talking about Eastern religions as well. I have a big point of contention with the Bible in Genesis, in the way that it says something in Genesis like, all of the plants and herbs and animals were put here for our disposal, basically, right? And that brings us out of the great web of relation that we're a part of. Even Eastern religions do it, like Buddhism, and they do it a little different, right? In Buddhism, they talk a lot about reincarnation, and the idea of reincarnation is that, every time we reincarnate, we're learning lessons, right? So we have this idea, even in those Eastern religions of Buddhism and Hinduism and those types of religions, that, well, the world is just a stage for us to learn our lessons. And maybe that's true, but that also sets us up to be the most important part of this world. And while we are important, we're not the most important part, because you can't weigh things like that. Are we more important than the trees? No. The message this week is all about doing what you can to get out and honor the spirits of the land, the spirits of the trees, the spirits of the rivers, and what have you. I would like for you to think about it like this, because I know that this idea, while on the surface of it, it seems to make sense, there's another part of it that's very counterintuitive, because, we're human, and we relate to other humans, and we relate to the human experience that we have and that other humans have. We might not very well relate to the experience of a deer in a forest or a fish in a lake. And yet those beings, they have their own spirits. The beings of mountains have their own spirit. I mean, if you're local to where I'm at, if you've ever been near Mount Washington or seen Mount Washington, it would be very hard to look at that or stand in the presence of that mountain and not feel its intensity, not feel its spirit. Thinking that humans are the only spirit in the afterlife or in the spirit world, that's almost as arrogant as thinking that we're the only intelligent life in the universe. It can't be, right? It just intuitively doesn't make sense. I would love for you to look at, if you don't already, look at nature as spirit, right? And to look at it as a reflection of our Creator, whatever that is to you. Forest bathing, going out for those walks, feeling so much better when you're done with it. That is such an important part of our existence because we are of nature and we should intermingle again and work with nature, be in nature. And that goes all the way to hiking, right? And, spending time recreationally out in nature. But the other side of that is actually working with nature to create sustenance. And over and over and over again, over the past week or so, I've had messages of like, hey, you got to get your gardening on. You got to have a garden. You got to plant sunflowers. You got to have tomatoes. You got to have that. You got to plant pumpkins, all of this. And Spirit seems to be feeling the warming of the planet just as much as I am. And my husband and I have great big gardens around our house, and we've let them go to weed and seed and all of that. Over the past year or so, I've just been so busy wanting to hike and go see waterfalls and all of that that I haven't paid a lot of attention to the property around our house. And I'm feeling such a drive to make that different this year. Yeah, I'll get some hiking in and I'll go recreate out in the wilderness as much as I can. But boy, do I want to work in the gardens this year. And it's just something, boy, that's just pulling me, right, to come into closer relationship with not only the spirits of the land I live on, but the spirits of the plants and the shrubs and the blueberries and the apple trees and all of those different spirits and energies that we are a part of. So this is what I'd like you to do, right? Get through the last week or so, month or so of winter, and think about what you can do, even if you have an apartment, and even if you don't have land to call your own, what you can do to get out into nature and to interact with those spirits and show appreciation, show gratitude. I'm a huge believer in what a lot of people would call the divine feminine, right? The divine feminine. It seems like most of the modern religions that we suffer from seem to be very patriarchal. All of the prophets, Buddha was a male, and Muhammad was a male, and Jesus was a male, right? So it seems to be very male-centric. And I think that the closer you get to spirit, and the more that you work with spirit, both the dead and the land, you realize that everything comes from the divine feminine. Everything that was born comes from a womb. And if it's not a human womb, it's still a womb. Think about the Big Bang, that moment in the universe was created. That was a birth, right? That was a birth. That was something that came from a womb of sorts, right? A very spiritual practice that I find useful for myself, and this is something that you may want to consider taking into your own everyday practices, is a sort of grace. So I see, plants as people. I see trees as people. I see animals as people. They have their own communities. Science now is showing us so much about how plants react to the stimuli around them, how plants react to music and yelling and soothing singing, right? They all react differently. I was in the woods probably 3 or 4 months ago. It was probably 3 or 4 months ago, right between fall and winter. There wasn't snow on the ground, but it was cold. And I walked by a tree, and I swear I heard from this tree, "Are you going to hurt me like the others?" This wasn't virgin forest, right? I don't know if virgin forest even exists where we're at anymore, being forest that was never cut down or harvested. So this wasn't virgin forest. And it seemed like the land was carrying this memory and seeing me as an invader, right? Seeing me as something that was going to come in and kill it and its brethren. And this might sound like woo-woo to you, but nature has sentience. There's a really great TED talk about the science of trees, and what they've found is that you have a mama tree, and this mama tree will drop off cones and seeds, what have you, and underneath this mama tree will be its seedlings, but other also plants and trees. And they have found that the mama tree recognizes its babies and lends more water and nutrients to those trees. That's fascinating to me, that they have their own intelligence or sentience, right? Again, not human, but a spirit and a sentience all the same. This grace that I'm talking about, though, this grace is something that I do, this little tiny prayer that I do every time I eat something. Every time I eat, it's something that is plant material, something that is meat material, right? And every time I do, the very first thing that I do is I thank the animal and plant people for lending their life to give me sustenance. The second thing I thank are the people that prepared and brought that sustenance to me. And I lend a thought to the people that grew the food, raised the food, harvested the food, prepared the food, packaged it, all the way up to even the person that was cooking the food, right? So if I'm sitting in a restaurant, that prayer includes gratitude for the person slaving in the kitchen, right? And then the final piece of that grace is I thank the great green earth that brought it all to me, right? The sustenance and the people that are part of the earth and the people that are preparing and packaging and harvesting that food. And what that little prayer does is that helps us to come into relation. It helps us to remember that we are all just a piece of this great web of relation that we find ourselves in, and that we're not really on top of the food chain. We're not. We like to think we are, but we're not. I mean, go take a safari in Africa and go hang out with the lions and don't take any firearms or weapons, and then go tell me that you're at the top of the food chain there. You're not. It's more of like a food web, if you will, a web of relation. And I say this because, again, doing what I do, I focus very much on the human spirits, right? The dead, the beloved dead and our ancestors. And yet we can't forget the spirits of the land, the spirits of the mountains, the trees, the spirits of the food that we're ingesting, the spirits of the sun that lend all of us energy, right? All life comes from the sun feeds the plants feed the animals, and we eat plants and animals. So we gain life from death, but we also gain life from the sun. So just look at, the rest of this year, summer, this month, the last bit of winter that we're in, as a way to prepare yourself to get out into nature. And the next time you are in nature, say thank you. I'm a big believer in making offerings to not only the dead, but to the spirits of the land. I will truck around a jug of maple syrup often. If I'm hiking, I got a little maple syrup. I'll pour it in the river, pour it at the base of a waterfall, pour it in the woods, right? And lend that sweetness to those spirits as an act of gratitude. It's very important for us to kind of get back to that. So, animism, spirits of the land, and how you can interact and how they can benefit you and you can benefit them. Very, very important. So, that's the message. And now, what I'd like to do is give some clarity into our upcoming week as a collective. And it's hard to do any sort of future telling, fortune casting, fortune telling, if you will. So what I'd like to do is pull a tarot card and a rune to lend us some insight that we all need to know. So I'll get the tarot in a little bit, but right now I want to pull a rune and share the wisdom of that rune to you and to all of us. And I believe that we can all benefit from the wisdom of these allies and tools that we have at our disposal here. So let me go here and pull a rune. Okay. So the rune that I pulled is called Iwaz. Kind of looks like a Z, right? So this is the 13th rune. This is the rune of death, and this is also a protective rune. But it's also the rune of the yew tree, the Y-E-W tree. And the Y-E-W, the yew tree, can be very poisonous to humans, and they find them often in the cemeteries in Europe, around churches, right? And that's their association with death. But the yew tree is one that's really, really great for making bows, right? Because it's flexible. And yet, this is the rune of death, the rune of spirit, and how spirit interacts with us. Death is all around us, right? We've kind of sanitized death in our modern life, right? But death is something that every time you eat something, you're eating something that's dead, and you're gaining life and energy from it. But this talks about being in between the worlds, right? Going from this world to another world, but also having one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. So when you are out in nature, and you are looking at, trees and all of that, you must honor the cycle of life and death, and you must honor the fact that we have those worlds around us all the time. The world of the living and the world of the dead. Neither is better than the other. They just exist together. That rune calls me to tell you to not only see how you're interacting with nature, but interacting with the world of spirit and interacting with the world of the dead. Because you are, whether you realize it or not, you are at constant interaction with them all around you, with nature all around you. Now, tarot card. Excuse me, the Ace of Pentacles. So Pentacles in tarot represent the element of earth, and that's all we've been talking about. But we also see all sorts of nature down here, right? And this is a gift. Boom. This is a new beginning. This is a gift from spirit. Nature to me is spirit. And I know that it's difficult to draw a delineation, right? But I will tell you, when I think of trees, and I think of plants, and I think of birds, and I think of animals, and I think of nature in and of itself, that's spirit to me. We are spirit, right? We're part of all of creation, all of spirit. So that Ace of Pentacles, that's a new beginning, that's a blessing, that is a fortune, because pentacles are also coins, and coins and money seem to be very connected to the earthly realm, right? You don't need money in spirit. So how can you interact with nature? How can you have a house plant in your home? You're interacting with nature. That house plant has a spirit. How can you interact with nature in a healthy, benevolent, beneficial, mutually beneficial way? Something that I would love for you to think about, and this is something that's very close to my heart, is in the springtime, we're creeping up on, to me, one of the worst parts of the year. One of the worst parts of the year for me is mud season. Mud season, where we're at, is that time between, winter into spring, where it's warming up, all the snow's melting, and the ground gets really gooey. But when the snow disappears, I see all the litter. right? I see litter everywhere, and it's just so disgusting, and it grosses me out, and it's awful, and it hurts my heart. It does. That people can be so blatantly irresponsible and all sorts of really negative things, selfish, self-centered, all of those things, to toss trash out the window, right? Just bring it home. Green Up Day. Can you do some work around your home, the roads that you travel on? Can you become a steward for nature? Not just the nature that's in your backyard, but the nature that you're a part of, the community around you that you're a part of. Can you become a steward for that? I'd like you to consider it, please. Again, this is early, right? Usually Green Up Day is like end of April and into May, right? But we don't need to wait until Green Up Day to do green up work around us. And by doing so, we are honoring the spirits of the land that we're cleaning up for. So, nature, animism, all of that stuff. How can you come into better relation? Think about that for me. Think about how it benefits you, how you can benefit it, and how that in and of itself is a spiritual act. So, thank you. Please sit with this. This is very important, not only in the micro, not only in our own small little communities, but around the world. This is very, very important. So give it some thought, have a wonderful week, and get out in nature. So thank you.